Good evening, everyone. I'm Mary Bergman. I'm one of the festival co-chairs, and it's with great joy that I welcome you to the 8th Annual Nantucket Book Festival on behalf of our entire festival committee. Excuse me. It's wonderful to see so many of you here at our opening night celebration and at our other festival events throughout the weekend. Special thanks to those of you who came out yesterday during that deluge that we had. That was a real Nantucket introduction for some of our writers traveling from afar. They got to experience what it's like to be stuck on the other side, but I'm so thrilled that everybody is here, so it really is a miracle. But one of my favorite things about the festival are those moments just before an event begins, where a new community has formed and we're all connected by the same words. So I just want to thank the festival committee for all their hard work all year long. And I'd especially like to thank B. Shea, who's been involved with in charge of the local author tent in the library. It is really, I helped her this morning, and it is a massive undertaking, and I think she deserves a big round of applause. I'd also like to thank our sponsors and donors who make so much of what happens this weekend possible. Jill Karp and Nantucket Island Resorts, the Nantucket Athenaeum, the Margaret Ritchie R. Battle Family Charitable Fund, and special thanks to the Unitarian Meeting House and to Mary Heft for her support and the work of the Nantucket Book Festival in our island schools. And thank you to all those listed in the back of our program and those of you who gave even after our program went to press. So having so many of the festival events free and open to the public is really critical to the success of this weekend. This is how we nurture the powerful community of informed readers. But putting on a festival of this size does require financial support. If you have been thinking about donating to the festival, this is a great time to become a supporter. I started doing freelance work for an NPR station last year, and I've learned a thing or two from public radio. So, thank you all so much. And I'd also like to introduce our festival co-founder and president of the Nantucket Book Foundation, Mary Heft.
It is more fantastic than you could know for us to look out and see this audience full. We're here because you are, and we are incredibly, deeply grateful. What you should know is we really are a little band of us. There's a team that puts this festival on. We have one spectacular staffer, our executive director, Maddie Holstrom. Maddie, where are you? Take a bow. Thank you. And then it's a band of us. Literally, it's a team. We dedicate our time and talent to making this possible. So I'm hoping every single person in our book festival team, go team, everyone stand up, take a bow. It's all of us. And that is what brings us to this night. We believe in the power of words to connect us to our shared humanity. A central mission of what we do is to bring that connection into the lives of our island students. Writer Dave Cullen will be with our Nantucket High School students on Monday. We brought visiting author Jason Reynolds to our island in April. We reached the entire island's students, grades 5 through 12. Jason brings his own brand of honesty and authenticity and how he explores universal themes of fear and loneliness and trying to fit in. Using the page as a canvas, he paints with words stories that tell this truth. Honesty is what bleeds through, he told me. It breaks through the skin barrier, it breaks through the cultural language, it breaks through all of that. The humanity in me will always connect with the humanity of others if I have learned how to illuminate that with honesty and authenticity. My job isn't to protect them from anything. It's to prepare them for everything. That is exactly what we aim to do here, and it is our hope. Our emergent young writers, whom we honor tonight, exemplify this hope, writing with authenticity and honesty their own stories. Our work is a partnership with the Nantucket schools, the teachers, librarians, and principals. We have tonight 2 fantastic teachers, and any other teachers, please stand up. Any teachers, stand up, take a bow. This award would not happen without the help of teacher Stacy Edswald and the time and talent of our 2 judges, Sandy Mitchell, longtime beloved teacher on island, and Jim Saltzer, a now former but incredibly beloved teacher, author of a series of children's books. It is my honor to present Sandy and Jim.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Each year of the book festival, Jim and I are honored to listen to the voices of our young people through their written words. This year's essayists were asked to describe a person who had made an impact on them, beyond the roles of parent and teacher. And so we are pleased to present this year's winners to you tonight. Our first runner-up, Anya Mogensen, cannot be here. She's at a family event off island. She wrote an essay called This is Van. Her essay reminds us of the human qualities of love, respect, and kindness. As she works with an autistic first grader, she describes the inspiration she discovers and the hope that she may one day go into a profession that will allow her to work with children like Van. So that was our first runner-up. Our second runner-up, the second runner-up is Maryanne Vasquez Cruz, who wrote an essay, in her essay, The Habit of Not Giving Up. She writes a tribute to soccer coach Jesus Partida, better known as Chewy to some of us, who, in her words, has helped Hispanics around the island enjoy the sport of soccer. Featuring crisp, descriptive details, Maryanne's essay chronicles Jesus Chewy's tireless efforts to keep working with her on drills that not only improved her passing and shooting, but also taught her a crucial lesson that giving up is not an option. Maryanne?
Thank you, Sandy. We love the diversity in these essays, diversity of people, diversities of cultural tools that the kids are learning. This next essay, another runner-up, we call this the second runner-up, is by Sarah Hanlon. Sarah, would you stand, please? A tribute to piano teacher Diane Lehman. This essay celebrates the lasting effects of a caring teacher who shows real faith in her student. As she worked with Diane to master a piece by Bach, Solfeggio, Sarah also learned much more. She writes, Diane has given me the tools to learn how to overcome problems and live a more productive life. Congratulations, Sarah. Sonia? Our first runner-up is entitled Let's Go Outside by Sonia. This essay is more than just a celebration of the knowledge of nature that Sonia soaked up as an 8-year-old when she was part of Junior Rangers, a group led by poet and naturalist Len Jimenera, remember Len? At the Mass Field Station. It's also a meditation on the respect she learned for the environment and about the way she learned to stand up for what she believes in a caring and thoughtful way. Congratulations, Sonia. Thank you very much. Haley Ray, will you stand? Haley wrote our winning essay this year, a touching meditation on the importance of being your confident self. Our winning essay describes the great influence of vocal coach Carolyn Butler in helping Haley overcome fear and self-doubt as she performed in front of others. With drama and grace, this essay recreates a pivotal moment in Haley's life when she had a simple, profound breakthrough. Carolyn made me realize that to succeed in life, I have to be myself. Congratulations. Great job. And here is your envelope. Right down.
Congratulations again to all of you. I've been thinking about the spaces that we share throughout the festival, the churches, the library, this beautiful meeting house, and that they were all built nearly 200 years ago, yet continue to endure. Voices of change, voices that questioned, voices that demanded to be heard have echoed through these sanctuaries for centuries, and that's what tonight is about. This evening's celebration is titled, How Can We Write When Everything's Wrong? What is the role of writer in our terrifying modern world? How does one find the inspiration, the motivation to keep writing in these tumultuous times? We asked our featured writers tonight to speak from their unique perspectives. Ben Fountain's novel, Brief Encounters with Che Guevara, won the PEN Hemingway Award and the Barnes & Noble Discover Award for fiction. His novel, Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, was the winner of the National Book Critics Circle Award and a finalist for National Book Award. His latest book, Beautiful Country Burn Again, is journalism, history, and memoir about the country's current existential crisis. Please join me in welcoming Ben Fountain.
Hello, everybody. This is my second time at the Nantucket Book Festival, and I'm so happy to be back that I just drank 3 glasses of champagne at the reception. So thanks to Epernay. And so the text for tonight is, how can we write when everything's wrong? And my reaction to that is, how can we not? Writers write because we have to know there's some essential mystery or problem in our lives, and we'll never have any peace in ourselves at a certain point where we realize if we don't make the most strenuous kind of effort to understand the problem. I expect most writing that's any good starts from this place of questioning and confusion, this urgent need to know, to figure it out, to lay it bare, and how much more urgent the need is when everything, and lately there have been plenty of days when it sure seems like everything is wrong. When language itself, which happens to be the writer's particular turf, it should be noted, is subject to the foulest sorts of abuse and manipulation in the service of greed and corruption at the highest levels of society. What's going on? How did we get here? How can we make it better? I expect there are lots of writers out there who want to know, who need to know the answers to these questions. I can say for sure that this writer wants and needs to know, and the only way he's going to make any headway in this project is by sitting down and trying to write about it. In fact, maybe language properly used, language in the service of truth, that is, of presenting the genuine facts of human existence, is the only way to know. Or at the very least, it's the necessary starting point. Seeing things for what they are and finding the language to portray these things in all their fullness and complexity, this is the job of writers. Clear seeing, clear thinking, clear expression. In fact, I think it's not too much to say that writers are in effect the scouts and spies of the human tribe. When a writer publishes a piece of work, he or she is essentially saying to the rest of us, I went to this place, this particular region in the vast landscape of human experience. I found out everything I could, and here's my report, rendered as honestly and truly and accurately as I can make it. Scott Fitzgerald gave us one such report with The Great Gatsby, exploring that fraught territory where love overlaps with money in a capitalist society. Toni Morrison did the same in Beloved, with her report on slavery's destruction of the bodies and psyches of people of color in America, a legacy that by no means resides safely in the past, but in fact haunts and bedevils us down to this present day. Here's a question. In a time when everything is wrong, do writers have to write directly at the wrongness for their work to be worthwhile? And so, for instance, does a fiction writer who's happily working on a novel have to go charging off to follow presidential candidates around the land and write nonfiction reports about an election season in which it seems like everybody has totally lost their mind? I think the answer to that question is no, he doesn't, unless his head and his heart lead him that way. In a time when everything is wrong, all good writing does its work. And so a novel about, say, a young woman's coming of age in rural 1850s Pennsylvania, or a lyric poem about a contemporary working mom's daily commute, or a short story about the only psychotherapist in private practice in the entire state of North Dakota, all of these have important work to do. Whatever is wrong about us in our times, whatever is wrong in us, will be present on some level if the writing is good, if it's getting down into the stuff of life as it's actually lived, and doing it as accurately and fully as possible, without sentimentality or a programmatic political agenda or a wish to please or flatter the reader. The kind of writing I'm talking about, it's not decoration or window dressing. It's not just one more choice in our ever-expanding menu of entertainment options. The kind of writing I'm talking about is essential if we're to have any hope of making sense of ourselves, our lives, our society, our place in the world. And so to the young writers here tonight, these fine prize winners, this work you've applied yourself to and been recognized for, it's some of the most important kinds of work a person could do. So don't ever let anybody tell you it's not serious or useful, that in fact it's not crucial if we're going to have any chance of living decent lives. And so if in the goodness of time you choose to pursue this work farther, if, say, you go to college and you find yourself concentrating in philosophy, literature, rhetoric, languages, there will come a day when someone, an adult probably, will come at you with the question of, what are you going to do with that? And here's one answer you might offer them. What I'm going to do with that is try to understand. Understand, they'll say. Understand what? And you might answer, everything I can. Everything I can. Which, of course, is the only reasonable answer in a world where all too much is always going wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Madeline Miller. Her first novel, The Song of Achilles, was awarded the 2012 Orange Prize for Fiction. It has been translated into 25 languages. Her second novel, Circe, was an instant New York Times #1 bestseller and has won many awards. Miller has taught or tutored Latin, Greek, and Shakespeare to high school students for many years. And my sister is a teacher, so this strikes me that all the teaching that you've done is just so incredible. And to write while you teach is really powerful. So I hope you will join me in welcoming Madeline Miller.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the Nantucket Literary Festival for asking this question, because I think it's a really important one. I want to tell you a story about a group of people who are survivors of a terrible war. They are, in fact, the only survivors of this war. None of them were the people who started the war, and none of them had the power to stop it. They're just the remnants of it. In this story, their mothers and fathers, their children, their grandparents, they're people who are so old and sick that they have to be carried. Some of them were wealthy before their city was destroyed, but now they have nothing but what they are wearing, what they were wearing when they ran out of the city that was burning around them. They've lost absolutely everything. And now they have to go and find a place to live, a new place. So they set off, trying to find a new home, somewhere that will accept them, refugees as they are, in their ragged clothes, with all their trauma and their grief carried on their backs. They go through all kinds of trials. They pass by monsters. They're rejected and cast out. And finally, they are hit with a terrible storm. A storm that whirls in and destroys what's left of their fleet. And one ship in particular, with the leader of this group, is sort of cast up onto an unknown shore. The leader and all his people are exhausted. Their food has been destroyed by the salt water that washed onto their ship during the storm. So he needs to go look for help for his people. And he heads off, and he sees a settlement, and he heads towards it. And one of the first things he sees in the settlement is a huge building. And on the sides of that building is the story of the Great War that he and his people have survived. And he starts weeping. And he says, very famously, Sunt lacrimae rerum, et mentem mortalia tangunt, which means, here there are tears for things. Here the mortal pain touches people's minds. And what he means is, here there is someone who understands what we have been through. Here there is someone who knows our name. And that to me exemplifies the power of story. That in that moment, looking at this artwork, which is telling the story of their own suffering, that person, who happens to be Aeneas, by the way, that's from Virgil's Aeneid, is able to finally feel a sense of safety. It says, for the first time, something new wasn't terrifying. Instead, he felt a great comfort that he could be known. And that story of Virgil and his suffering and his band of refugees, who are the Trojans escaping fallen Troy, is told by Virgil, who knows something about suffering. Virgil was living in a time in the Roman Empire where there had been almost 100 years of civil war. There had been all kinds of political upheaval. There had been great purges, death after death. Virgil's own family had lost their lands. So pain upon suffering upon pain. And what I think stories really can do in those moments, and what writing can do and art can do, whether visual or on the page, is I think it can make space for that suffering. It can say to voices who can't speak for themselves, we hear you. It can say, come and we will listen to your story, or if you can't tell it, we will try and go there and listen and understand and bear witness to your story if we can. I think human beings are creatures of story. We can read all the statistics, all the numbers, all the facts, but nothing touches us like story. And so stories, writing, telling stories is the most important thing we can do. I agree with what Ben Fountain said. We must write. The more injustice we see, the more suffering we see, the more we are obligated to speak up if we can. And we don't have to. It has to come from a place of passion. It has to come from you feeling it. But if you do feel it, speak up. To you young writers, never be afraid to speak up. Because as writers, we can bear witness, as I said, to those who can't always speak for themselves. I want to talk just very briefly about sort of the suffering that I see a lot right now. And I know that it's really easy in these times to kind of turn on the news or the TV and just within 30 seconds, your circuits are overloaded. And you think, I can't take in any more of this. But suffering was something I thought a lot about as I was writing my most recent novel, because the main character endures a great amount. And one of the things that really drew me to her as a character was the fact that she never allows herself to be shorted out. She keeps making the choice to try again, to reach out, to connect. And so that is what I would say in this moment, is that stories allow that kind of connection. They allow us to reach out and to connect in moments when nothing feels right. They encourage our empathy, which is, I think, going to be the great saving grace of the human people. So, in conclusion, go forth and feel empathy.
Thank you so much for that. That was fantastic. Next, we're going to hear from Dave Cullen, a New York Times bestselling writer who has been covering the blight of mass murders in America for more than 2 decades. He is an Edgar Award and Goodreads Award winner, and his newest book, Parkland, was anybody there this afternoon to hear Dave speak? Yeah, it was really fantastic, is a story of hope, and it is the birth of the March for Our Lives movement. So please join me in welcoming Dave Cullen.
Fill up here. Hi. So in 2nd grade, Sister Mary at Queen Elizabeth Elementary School, or excuse me, Queen of the Rosary Elementary School, threw the fear of God into me. Quite literally, although she didn't mean it that way. And what she did was she took a piece of yellow chalk and she wrote in huge block letters the entire width of the chalkboard. And this is actually the first memory I have from school. The word vocation. And so we have some Catholics in the audience. And she meant it in the Catholic sense, of course. And she just described, really poorly, I thought at the time, how some of us boys were going to hear the calling for the priesthood, and some of the girls to the convent. And my first reaction was, oh, you have to be called? And seriously, I was really getting nervous because I was like, I didn't realize this was invitation only. And seriously, it was the first time in my life, and I didn't use those words at the time, but that was my first sort of existential career crisis because I'd had my career all figured out by then. I was a very good little Catholic boy, and I was going to be a priest, then bishop, hopefully, what do you call the red cap, cardinal, and maybe Pope, that. I realized that was a long shot, but that was the goal, and I was like, if you're a good Catholic, why not? But it had never occurred to me, seriously, that you had to get called. And so I had all these questions. I was the only one asking questions. And I really annoyed her. I remember her being so frustrated with me. But I wanted to know, what does this sound like? And do you mean it literally? And I'm sure I didn't use the word literal, because I'm sure I didn't know that word then. So I didn't have the vocabulary, but that's the concept I was trying to get. Do you mean I'm going to hear something? And I was terrified I wasn't going to. And seriously, so this was really, this made a mark. I still remember this very clearly. Well, it turned out she was wrong. Because basically she was hemming and hawing and said, everybody's different. And the thing you'll know when you're here, which is total bullshit about everything. And that's right, you'll know when you're really in love, or, all those kinds of things. So it turned out she was wrong because she was sort of leading toward no, not really, literally. It turned out I did hear it really 4 times in my life. I heard my name called, and that's what it sounded like. And I don't mean Dave, the arbitrary thing. I mean who I am and who I am and what I'm here for. And I heard it very clearly. And the first time was in Urbana, Illinois in 1979, my freshman year of college. And it was in cultural anthropology class. And it wasn't the word anthropologist, because that sounded fine and interesting and but I didn't hear, nothing sang out to me. It's when we were introduced to this book, which I meant to pack and forgot. So Maddie was so nice enough to print the cover for me. It's called Yanomamo, the Fierce People. And it's now, I looked up today, it was in the 6th edition, by Napoleon Chagnon. And this really made a mark on me. This is one of the Yanomamo people. I'm sure you can't see, but you can Google it later. In the Amazon basin, I believe in Venezuela. And introduced the idea of participant observer. And when I heard that phrase, participant observer, I was like, oh, that's who I am. And I at this time, it was more like, wait, that's a job description? Like, you can do that for a living? And at the time, I was already like a gung-ho young reporter working at the Daily Illini every day, kind of instead of going to college. And there, we were, worshiping at the holy grail of objective reporter and observer, and like participant was like the dirty word. And objectivity was the holy grail because we were gullible, and the people who taught us that were stupid, or at least myopic to a point. And there is definitely a need for objectivity in certain types of journalism. And if you're covering politics or the courts or all sorts of stories, it's really vital. And they taught us about this distance between objective distance between you and your source. And that's really vital in certain types of journalism. But in the types that I was going to go on and do, which I had no idea at the time, I want to shrink that distance to just as close to nothing as possible. And with Columbine, my goal was to try to be inside the heads of the killers and not even to be inside looking out. And for you, the reader, to feel like you're in their head and you're grasping who they are. In a lot of types of writing, and so I don't really call myself a journalist. Journalism is something I do some of the time, but not really a writer. Much more toward the anthropologist, which has been my model. And I'm not really sure today, I was thinking about it, why I didn't sort of like change majors at that moment and become an anthropologist, but I was really having fun at the journalism, enjoying it. Anyway, then I got burned out on journalism, thought I got burned out on writing, but it turned out it was just daily journalism wasn't the thing for me, and I had taken it as far as I could. Thank you. So 3.5 years into college, I dropped out and enlisted in the Army. And then I went to, did the business thing and did that for 10 years. And it was after I'd like slowly come back to writing and realized maybe I did want to do this. Oh God, I do need my phone again. To get this quote right, the second time, we think it was in the front row. Actually it was the fourth time, but I'm cutting out a couple, was when I was back in writing school in 1995, Laurie Anderson released an amazing album called The Ugly One with the Jewels and Other Stories, a reading from stories from the Nerve Bible. But it's a spoken word album, which is brilliant. And there's a song on it called The Salesman, where she says, "Now, I've always been interested in trying to define what makes up the late 20th century America. So as an artist, I've always thought my main job was to be a spy." And I was, spy? That's what I do. And that's what I've been doing. And that was really, really the moment that I understood the best way what my job is. And I can't believe she's the first person I've heard that, and the only one since that I've heard that from. But I think that's my job, and a lot of us, what we do in America, whatever in the world, is sort of like go in there and spy on America, and then come back and report to America like what we've seen and what it is, and really get inside. And that's another version of participant observer, of observing. And I was going to tell a story from like one of each of my books, but of course I've run through most of my time. So I'm just going to tell one quick one from the third book, which I'm still working on, which Parkland interrupted, my gay soldiers book, which I think I'm going to retitle Hiding. And I've been, do you like that title? Well, talk to me later. So I've been, 19 years ago, I first met these three captains. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. I was working on a story about at the height of Don't Ask, Don't Tell for Salon.com, and I pitched a policy piece. It was very specific, and I was working on it. And my editor, Joan Walsh, who went on to run the place, who's amazing, said, "Do you think by any chance that you could get one of these, active duty soldiers to, give us a quote, obviously anonymously?" She said, "It's not really important," but I was like, oh God. Impossible. No, I can't find one of these people. But so, of course, that was a challenge. And so, like, I went after doing it, and I got help from the people at GLAAD and HRC and SLDN. I knew we had great contacts at all those places. And they tried and eventually, like, said, this is never going to happen. No, it's too dangerous. Nobody can do this. So it bugged me for a few more weeks. I continued working on it, and then I realized what I was going to do. I lived in Denver, and Colorado Springs is about 80 miles away, and it's surrounded by military bases. The Air Force Academy, Fort Carson, and 2 Air Force bases, and there's a huge gay bar, a complex of them downtown where everybody goes. And so I went there on a Saturday night. And after I did that, I couldn't believe, like, how come no other reporter did this? Like, it's not that hard to find the gay soldiers. And one of them was a Marine. Anyway, this is much more complicated. It was more complicated once I got there than I thought. But the short version, I met and got to know one of them that night. And then he took me inside of his world. And for the next 5 months I spent on this story, which, by the way, I got paid $1,000. But I knew as I was doing it how important it was. And again, this was sort of a career-making moment for me. And partway through, this is also, I think, a key moment for younger writers out there. I realized, so he introduced me to all his friends and took me into his world and got to know them, and gradually several of them agreed to participate. And I'm gay, I had been a soldier, and so I thought I had a pretty good idea what it was like to be gay in the military, because I was gay in the military, although not at the same time, because I was so closeted, even to myself at the time. I didn't figure it out till later. But so I thought I understood these people. Their lives were so different than anything I expected or imagined, much less had read about. So many things. Like, one key thing is that it was so easy for them to have sex, or to just even deal with it, to do it. For really complicated reasons that I explained in the Salon piece, it was really hard to have a boyfriend. And so this policy had this weird unintended consequence of forcing them into, meaningless sports sex and, like, not having a serious relationship. And so we called the piece "Don't Ask, Don't Tell, Don't Fall in Love." And it was 11,000 words in 2 parts. It won a GLAAD Media Award because there hadn't been something like. We got 3 guys we changed their names and identities, and the whole thing was about them and just their lives. Oh, I skipped that. 2 months into it, I called Joan and said, the piece I've been working on? I think I got a much better piece. What if we just did the story, an ethnographic piece about their lives, what it's like to be these guys? And I'd already talked to her about, like, the things I was finding out and what their lives were like, and she was kind of amazed. And when I pitched that, she said, I love it, do it. And so that became the thing. And 20 years later, it's going to be a book. I'm most of the way done with it. And I've been following them now at their lives. But I was so shocked. I didn't realize what a shitty spy I was, and what really all the writers in America who have covered gays in the military have been, that we didn't understand the most basic stories about what their life was like. And even working on the book, I'm just lately getting to understand the impact of Mark. I'm still calling one of the guys Drake. They're going to reveal their names on publication day. But Drake's, we'll call him his boyfriend because he was for most of the book. They're always talking about the spouse, and so how much harder it is on the spouse. And I was always including Mark in the book, but I didn't really realize how, just what an important thing is. And until Drake told me the story of the day the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell took effect. So it was 6 months later that finally, officially, you could come out of the closet, because for various reasons, after the Senate passed it, actually after Obama signed it. So that day, Drake and Mark were on vacation, I think in Europe. So he did it by Facebook. They're huge travelers because the Army sends them all over the world, and they'd been together in Barbados and Venezuela and God, it's so terrible, Barcelona, and just picturesque places all over the world. And Drake had posted pictures of all those places, and so all his friends and everybody who knew him thought they knew his life. What they didn't know was those were only some of the pictures. And he had set his privacy settings to public on all of those. And for every picture of him at one of these places, there were like 10 others with Mark that had privacy settings for just a very small group of people, of family and trusted friends who knew the secret. And that day, I think it was in September, he just changed the privacy settings globally. And a friend of his, who actually knew about Mark but hadn't seen all this, gasped, and I think his quote was, and he put it in the comments, and suddenly a life appears. I was like, all these pictures, and Drake got gray during this, and like, there's Mark in all of that. He existed, but had been erased from this life. And there he was at all these stages for more than a decade, and had always been there. And I mean, this is what these guys went through, is the pain and the guilt of knowing that this is his boyfriend, living together basically as husband all over the world, and having to just erase him from his life. And anyway, so those are the kinds of stories you find out as a spy. And that's why, I mean, the short answer is I write because I have to, of course. I mean, I think we all do. And because I get to. And I like sharing those stories. Thanks.
Thank you all for coming out on this lovely night. And I think your homework is to go home and write, okay? And give to the book festival. Thank you.